What's going on, everybody? Almost Counts Collectibles here, and in this video we are going to be doing a little bit more comparison and review, if you will, of the new basic figures from the Playmates Toys Reignition line. Now, someone requested me compare these to some other figures, and there were some other figures I wanted to compare them to as well. There's some stuff I wanted to show you guys. There's some weapons I wanted to look at. Just some more stuff I wanted to talk about, so that's what we're going to do in this video. Now, first and foremost, I wanted to show you guys. So I mentioned this in the review, that it looked like we could probably pop these helmets off. Well, guess what, guys? You can remove the helmets. They pop right off. You have a ball joint under there. All I had to do was twist the helmet a little bit as I was pulling, and it eventually just popped off. So you can take the helmets off. Now, with that, I did put a Lightning Collection head on one of these figures. I'll be honest, the heads look just a tiny bit too big because these bodies are slightly smaller than the Lightning Collection. But I have Zach here. Let's put Zach. All right, there is Zach's civilian head from the Lightning Collection. Now, if you don't put it all the way down on the ball joint, it looks a little bit better because he actually has a little bit of neck. But as you can see, the head just looks a tiny bit too big for the body. Now, that kind of opens up the possibility, if you really wanted to, if you have some old broken figures, of like your old Automorphin Rangers, possibly even these Hasbro ones. If we were to take these heads off, whether we cut them off or whatever the case may be, and we drill a hole up in there and kind of modify this to go down over this ball joint, these are the head sculpts I think that would scale the best with these figures right here. But your Lightning Collection ones are going to be just a tiny bit too big. You can still put them on there, but like I said, it just won't look quite right in terms of the scaling. All right, so got that out of the way. So the first comparison that I kind of want to do here, these figures right here. Now, I really like these figures. These are what I call the VHS box collection. Hasbro released these. Now, in all fairness, I got my figures at a discount price. I got all of them brand new in the box for roughly $10 a piece, 8 to 10 bucks a piece, which for these figures was a very good price. These are good figures. They look good. The paint detail is there. They all came with their weapons. Now, their weapons weren't painted, but they did look good. The molding was great, and they go together to form the blaster. The Power Axe even has the sliding part right here for that. So I thought that was really cool. They do need painted, but still you got them. Also, with like the basic joints, they're connected at the groin. So you can do quick, kicks to the side, high kicks, stuff like that. But in comparison to the new figures, for one, these are about as tall as the Lightning Collection figures here. I have one right here. So in terms of height, these two scale pretty well together. So these are taller than the new basic figures. And they do have a little bit more detail in terms of paint. And overall, they do look pretty good. They even have the boots painted. But these retailed at over $20 a piece, between 20 and 25 bucks. So these were about the same price as the Lightning Collection figures. And although I do really like them, for $25 a figure, you have to take that into account. So when we're comparing these two figures, once again, we are comparing a figure that costs 20 to 25 bucks to a $9 to $10 action figure here. But with that being said, although I do like the design of the articulation in the hips better on these figures than I do the new ones, the new figures from the Reignition line have more articulation than these $25 figures. Although it's really unnecessary, they do swivel at the ankle. All right, now how helpful is that? Not much. But These figures right here do not do that, okay? There is no movement at the ankle. It doesn't go up and down. It doesn't swivel left and right. The knee is pretty similar in terms of articulation at the knee. The hip, like I said, is different. It's designed differently, but the, you know, the ability to go into like a high kick or whatever the case may be is still there, all right? So you can still go into a high kick. You just have to turn it a different way. Moving on up to the arms here, these do not swivel at the wrist. Now that wrist movement is actually pretty useful. The elbow is about the same. This kind of has more of a, I don't want to say ratchet, but it's got the grooves right there for the different degrees of angle that you would want to go to, and it locks it into place. These don't really do that. It just moves freely, which works fine. But these do move at the wrist, like I said. And then the shoulder is about the same. They only go up really so far, but they do go up and down. So the shoulder is similar. The heads turn left and right, slightly up and down, very similar to these, left and right, up and down. So these actually have more articulation than the VHS boxed collection. So that is the comparison. Now I do have the Dragon Dagger over here somewhere, I think. We'll compare the sizes. It is actually smaller. Much smaller, actually. But, you know, this is a tiny bit oversized. I'm not going to critique it too much. They won't even hold these weapons because their fingers don't grasp that closely. But that is them compared to these. Even the holsters are white. He does have a white holster, but he also has it on this one. The original Automorphin one was white, so it's not unheard of that they don't actually make the holster black. We can paint this one, but you can tell the Morpher paint, you know, the helmet looks better, additional paint there. We've actually got all the cuffs painted. The boots are painted black. We can do all that to this figure, but that is how they scale. So this one is taller, about Lightning Collection size, but this one actually has more articulation. All right, let's look at some other ones. So this is one of the triangular boxed releases back from when, well, I have it right here. So here we go right here. This is the Red Ranger with the shield, but this is that triangular box release. This was from 2016, back when Bandai was still cranking it out. So we'll go ahead and compare it to one of those. And that's going to be these two right here. These are from the same line. So I'm going to use Green Ranger for this one. All right, so when we talk about height, the triangular box is just slightly shorter. It also doesn't look as good. The symmetry and everything just isn't as good. He looks very muscular. The helmet looks even smaller on this one than these do on these figures. I think these are, the appearance of these look a lot like the Lightning Collection in terms of the plastic, what the plastic looks like, the symmetry of the plastic, the molding of the plastic. Everything looks very similar to this Lightning Collection, which all the more reason enforces my, you know, assumption that these were aimed more towards the collector. But in all fairness, even the plastic on the legs of the Automorphin figures looks similar. So these definitely have a lot of Lightning Collection look kind of to them. The paint's a lot more shiny and glossy. But let's talk about articulation. So there's height, like I said. This one's just a little smaller. No wrist movement. We've got the elbow joint movement, which is pretty much a solid, actually less than 90 degrees. The shoulder actually goes up a little bit higher. Helmet back and forth, but does not have any up and down movement. No waist movement. When we come down to the hips, once again, this is my preferred kind of hip design. It connects at the groin for those instant side kicks, but this one can still be made to work. We've got a 90-degree about bend at the knee and no ankle movement. So more articulation over here, and overall I think this figure looks better, more realistic. than these figures do. Let's go ahead and compare our new Red Ranger to what I would consider the most similar original action figure to this right here. So with the original toy line, there was no smaller like 5-inch scale figure to just fight with that didn't automorph until we got to the Power Rangers, the movie edition Rangers, and then these heroes right here that didn't automorph. So there's not a lot to compare these two, but I feel like this, and like I said, the movie Ranger would be the closest thing, because they didn't automorph, but they were about the same scale. So they are almost similar in height, almost exactly. The helmet of the heroes is actually just a smidge taller. But, you know, we've got the articulation. There was no additional articulation for the leg from the automorph. It was still the same movement. But as far as size, overall shape of the bodies, stuff like that, I think this is probably the closest thing, but this is much better. Much more articulated, looks even better, more like a Ranger. I'm really liking these figures right here, especially for the price range, guys. Even back in the 90s, you would have been hard-pressed to find a figure that, you know, looks this well, functions this well, comes with the accessories for that $8 to $10 mark. Most action figures back in the day, guys, had limited articulation. So this articulated figure right here, even by 90s standards, is pretty darn good. So, like I said, here's just the basic comparison for these. All right, what else are we going to look at? So here's the movie Rangers from that triangular box from Bandai. And these right here are probably the most accurate representation for the most part of the movie Rangers. You know, they look pretty good. The articulation's decent. It's almost identical to the other ones here, with a few exceptions, okay? So these movie Rangers actually move at the wrist. The heads actually move up and down. The feet actually move up and down a little bit independently and swivel to the sides just a little bit. We've got the, you know, the movement at the boot cuff right there. So these had a little bit more articulation, and, you know, for what they are, they actually look pretty good. But let's go ahead and compare these. Two different colored reds. The basic figure from the Reignition is a little bit taller. But there are those figures. Here are some of the smaller figures. I think this was more of the 2010-ish release, I believe. These are kind of similar to the triangular box release figures. They are much smaller. Articulation is pretty similar though, minus the turning at the top of the boot. Like I said, this isn't really a comparison, but I'm just kind of showing you guys for scale. They're almost half the size. Well, they're taller than half, but you guys can see the difference there. All right, last comparison. Now, although the heroes and the movie Rangers, the non-automorphin, you know, 5-inch line, were the first ones, I think, released that you could closely compare these two, I think the closest comparison in general would have to come with Zeo. Now with Zeo, back in the 90s, we saw the first release of actual non-automorphing action figures that looked like your more, you know, slim, slender Power Rangers, not boxy, not real, you know, thick or anything like that. And they actually had way more articulation in the legs because they had that joint that connects at the groin. So you could do a lot better kicking, you know, poses and all that stuff. Now with these action features, you were kind of limited on the arm articulation. Okay, so for example, Red Ranger with the little thing moved left and right, and his arm came up and down in a slashing motion to slice his sword. Now his other arm also went up and down, but you didn't really have any elbow or wrist or much movement in the shoulders at all. So as far as comparison goes, they're close to the same size. Looks like Zeo is a tad bit taller, but you got that more slim, slender design. You've got the more articulation in the hips for that leg movement. But once again, with the action features, you're kind of limited to posability and articulation up here in the torso. So by 90s standards, guys, these basic, 5-inch range figures with their articulation, the overall look of them, they come with their different weapons. I like these, okay? They're not perfect. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they are a good action figure and they are a good kid's toy. Better than what we had back in the day for about the same price. You just can't beat that, especially by today's standards. All right, I talked about these weapons. Now, these are from that VHS, boxed figures weapons. They do combine. They are to a larger scale. So I don't think these would look too good with these Rangers. I mean, it doesn't look bad, but you can tell that sword is obviously just a little too big for him. They do combine, but just in case you were curious if you could just take these weapons and give them to these Rangers, you could. I'm just saying that it would be kind of obvious that they're just a little too big for the Rangers because those Rangers are closer to the Lightning Collection size. But I did post a little screenshot of it at the end of my video. The original Automorphin weapons that actually combine, they scale great with these Rangers. They look great in their hands. Like I said, the size looks appropriate. Obviously, they just need some paint, but if you've got these laying around, or you want to try to just buy them online and just throw some paint on these instead of modifying the ones that they have, this is definitely a viable option because they scale great and they look really good with these Rangers. The one main thing I really like about these Rangers, though, is I don't think Playmates... Now, they might have known this all along. They might have intended this all along, and if so, good on them. All right, it was a great idea. The fact that these scale so well with the original villains really makes me want to go back, me and the kids, and like play with the old villains and actually fight each other. Even right here with the putty. With this putty right here, you can put these in different poses. You can fight with them. You can come up and, punch that Z real hard, and you can cause the heads to pop off and all that stuff. You can just do a lot of cool stuff with these figures. It makes you want to play with them because of, they look good. They look like the Rangers. They scale to the villains. You can put them in these different poses that actually, you can fight, you can do battles, all that stuff. And these scale excellently with the original villains and with the new Rita and hopefully all the other monsters that we're going to get. All right, guys, one more cool thing real quick. Now, I know they're planning on coming out with like the battle bikes, but they have that like flipping apparatus and stuff on them that I'm not too crazy about. Now, the good thing about these basic figures is they scale pretty well with the original battle bikes. I mean, they can actually fit on there. It actually doesn't look that bad when they're on the bikes. So if you want to use your original battle bikes, or if you just want to try to pick up some of the original ones because you don't care about what the new ones look like, these figures actually work pretty well with those old battle bikes. Now, here's the figures that came with those old battle bikes. I was going to compare those to these figures right here. I'll do that real quick, but I just don't think there's much of a comparison. So these are much smaller, over an inch smaller. They just don't look as good. Now, these do have more articulation. I know I said there wasn't really an articulated line outside of the Automorphin Rangers. If you want to count these, that's fine. They were articulated, but they weren't that same height. They don't scale well with the villains. They are much smaller. So yeah, I mean, you can consider those if you want. But in terms of a 5-inch action figure that actually looked good and functioned well in the articulation department, we didn't really have anything like that. I mean, these are much more articulated, but they were much cheaper looking. Like I said, they didn't scale very well with the villains. So yeah, but there they are anyways. But I do like the fact that these look pretty good with the battle bikes, and they actually fit in there So if you want to use them for the battle bikes, go ahead, just another option. I'm really liking these figures, guys. I think maybe the video is not doing it justice. I know a lot of people still think they look really cheap and they look terrible, and to each their own. And they are on the cheaper side because, you know, they're $10 action figures. But for a $10 figure, these are good figures. And I think if you actually had them in your hands, you would change your mind. And worst case scenario, if you're unhappy with them, you know, just return them. But I think that if you actually got these, I think that you would be pretty pleased with them because I'm excited about these. And it's really fun to have something new with Power Rangers that actually gets you back into Power Rangers. And like I said in my video, if anything's going to draw kids into Power Rangers, it's going to be stuff like this. It's going to be stuff like this. Okay, this is what we always wanted as a kid, right? You always wanted Rita, the main villain, but we never got her. And it's just a really cool time to be a Power Rangers fan. I know there's some negatives with this toy line. Trust me, I'm 50-50 right now. Half the stuff in this Ignition toy line, I'm thinking, what were they thinking? Because this is terrible. And then, you know, you see stuff like this, and you see stuff like this, and you get it in your hands, and you're like, man, this is good stuff. And once again, you got to give credit where credit's due, and you have to take some certain things into account. I understand these aren't Lightning Collection. I understand these aren't Legacy, but these also aren't $25 a piece. And I will never say that something's good if I honestly don't believe it. I really won't. And for $10, this still even is up to a pretty good standard as far as a figure goes. So I'm really liking these figures. I think you guys will too. I'm looking forward to fixing up the shield and fixing up Tommy, adding some paint. But I just wanted to show you guys, you can remove the helmets, how these scale and kind of look compared to some of the other figures and what's going on with that, articulation, all that good stuff. That they, you know, reinforcing the fact they scale with a lot of these older villains. So you can go back and, you know, fight them against the villains. There's plenty of villains to fight them against. And yeah, there's our figures, and that's how they kind of compare to that other stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys with a little bit more information and comparisons. And I look forward to doing some modification with this. So if you guys have any more questions, if there's anything else you want to see, any stuff you want answered, I have pretty much all the Power Ranger toys, okay? If you want me to compare it to something else, if you want me to look at something else compared to this, whatever the case may be, I will help you guys out the best I can. Just let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, everybody, I will see you next video.